Welcome to World Building Mastery, where I'll teach you everything I've learned about world building over my decade or so of experience in the hobby. This video is part of a series I'm doing on how to world build. You don't necessarily need to have seen all the other episodes to understand this one, as each will make sense in isolation, but I would encourage you to check them out in your own time, as they will also be very helpful to you. Today we'll be going over how to world build with a theme in mind, which is a subject I have not seen covered often, which I think is absolutely crucial to creating a compelling setting. I'll describe what I call the thematic method, how to implement it, how to choose the themes for your world-building project, and how to use those themes properly and apply them to everything in your setting. Let's begin. Part 1. Why world-building needs a theme. Now, all stories have a theme, even if the writer didn't consciously set out with one in mind. Usually there are several themes that can be interpreted from a work. As there is an inherently subjective element to art, different people will interpret different themes from the same work. But in much the same way that all stories have themes, all settings do as well. This is an observation that I've made, and it is my opinion that a great world builder must recognize this. I think it can be very helpful to world build with specific themes in mind, and that's what I call the thematic method. It's where you come up with a theme, and then you do all of your world building with that theme in mind. Now you can create a great setting without a specific theme in mind, but it might be harder for you, which is why the thematic method is useful. There are certain problems that occur without having a theme in mind, whether consciously or subconsciously. These problems include your setting feeling dull and uninteresting, unenchanted, incoherent, and dissonant. What I mean by all of that is that if you don't have a theme, different elements within your setting may not complement one another artistically, and so it'll feel less like a coherent work of art, and more like a jumble of disparate elements haphazardly conglomerated together, which is what a lot of world-building projects sometimes feel like. That is the problem which the thematic method can solve. So that is what I'm going to teach you today. Part 2. How the thematic method works. In the thematic method, one starts by choosing or identifying core themes within your world, which the setting will predominantly focus on. You can do this from the outset, or you can do this with a setting you already have and just rework it. Now, anything can be a theme. For example, resource depletion, or man's search for meaning, or the struggle for survival in a hostile universe, law versus morality, a million other things. These can all be themes that you could build a setting around. You can have more than one, of course, and really any setting with any level of depth and complexity will have more than one. It's just a matter of which ones are emphasized more. I do recommend having a few themes, perhaps only one, which you emphasize the most, and perhaps a few complementary ones sprinkled in to add nuance. Think of it as primary themes, secondary, and tertiary themes, so there's a hierarchy to them. But once you've chosen your core themes, especially the primary themes, and I'll explain how to do that soon, you can use these as a lens through which you can assess every other decision that you make in your world-building process. For example, if you choose a theme like the struggle for survival is ultimately futile, but still meaningful, and you are then making a decision later about how the magic system will operate, it might lead you in a clearer direction. You might decide that the amount of magic in the world is slowly fading with time, but it is also necessary in order to fight against certain hostile forces, like demons or whatever is besieging this world. So certain aspects of magic are preserved in specific artifacts, like the rings of power or, megaliths, whatever it is, in order to protect against these hostile forces like the demons and things. But then there are a finite number of these artifacts out there that were created in the ancient past, and they can no longer be repaired or replaced, and they sometimes get destroyed. So it creates a situation where magic has now faded to obscurity, and only these handful of artifacts remaining can store this magic, but now there's fewer and fewer of them with time, and they can't replace them. And this gives the setting a kind of tragic feeling, one of struggling against inevitability. And you might never have come up with this if you didn't have that theme in mind. And this is the real value of world building with a theme. Because, as I say, it gives you a lens to which to assess every other relevant decision. And that is why, in my opinion, I think it should be the first thing that any world builder does. It doesn't have to be, of course. You can be a great world builder without this. But I do think it is best, and I do think it is extremely helpful. Part 3. How to choose your themes. Anything you want can be a theme. As I just said, you can pick literally anything from an abundance of options to be the theme that you could build an entire setting around. But that makes it quite overwhelming because there are just too many options, right? And I wish I could give you a simple, straightforward, methodical way to decide upon a theme. But because it's such a broad and open-ended thing, I can't actually give you a framework for it in that sense. So I have to sympathize with you because it can be a very difficult decision. It's worth meditating on it. It's worth taking time to consider it. But often a theme will actually come to you naturally when you didn't expect it to. So if you've already started world building and you have a lot of lore written for your own setting, pay attention to recurring patterns within your lore and think about what kind of theme they might imply. So if you've got a lot of stuff like the megaliths or the magical artifacts, the magic is gone, or it's like there's certain ancient technology that they can't repair, think about what kind of themes those things imply. Themes of loss, themes of ancient prosperity that is now gone. All of these things can lean into themes, and it's worth just pondering this. Because there's not really any strict method for discerning your theme. And I also want to emphasize here, a theme doesn't necessarily have to be something deep and philosophical, although it certainly can be, and there are benefits to that. And again, you can have several themes, or you're likely to have several themes. So take, for example, Warhammer 40,000. This is a vast, expansive setting, and there's a lot of different themes that you could interpret the setting to have. For example, the struggle for survival in a hostile universe, the conflict of reason and religion, etc. But at the end of the day, the overarching theme of the setting of Warhammer is to have lots of big, stupid, fun stuff fighting each other to the death in the bloodiest and coolest ways possible. I mean, that's basically what the setting is all about. And that's a perfectly legitimate theme. It's perfect to build a setting around that. That's completely acceptable. And that's ultimately what Warhammer is. And that works. So again, go with whatever you want. Go with whatever theme you want to explore, whatever you feel like world building around. It is possible to change it later, although there are certainly difficulties associated with doing so bear that in mind. But as I say, a theme can be anything you want it to be, so just whatever you enjoy the most, whatever you find the most interesting, whatever you want to world build around. Spend some time thinking about it, and you will figure it out. So, part 4, how your themes will apply to your setting. Again, every decision you make in your world building will be affected by your theme, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to always bear your theme in mind or focus on it or hyperfixate on it. Obviously, you can make decisions without consulting your core theme or having chosen one. You absolutely can world build that way, and that's perfectly fine. And again, that can sometimes be the best way to discover what your theme actually is. Because it just depends on whether you're more of an architect or a gardener. If you're more of an architect, then you're more likely to decide upon a theme right from the outset. Whereas if you're more of a gardener, you're more likely to just start creating stuff and seeing what themes emerge. But either way, once you've found a theme that you like, it is best to just lean into it with all your future decisions and consider how they will complement and serve that theme. This is a mistake that a lot of settings make, where they'll have one thing that's the kind of core theme, and they're always telling you about it. But then they have a lot of stuff in the setting that kind of contradicts that. So, for example, if you have a cyberpunk setting, which is kind of Earth's resources have been depleted and most people live in slums, but then you show everyone having an abundance of flowing water in their house and plenty of food to eat, etc., it can start to feel a bit dissonant and out of whack with what the setting overall is going for. It's kind of like in Mad Max, where they're always talking about how much scarcity of diesel they have, but then they have all the cars that just burn through loads of diesel. That's not necessarily a bad thing for the setting, but if you don't do it properly, it can start to feel very dissonant and very incoherent. And the thematic method helps you to avoid those exact sort of problems. That's why the thematic method is valuable. Of course, I can't explain how theme will affect everything about your setting here and now, because otherwise this video would need to be 10 hours long instead of 10 minutes long. But over the course of this series, I will go more in depth on various aspects of world building in more detail. And in each of these cases, I will examine exactly how to apply the thematic method to that aspect. So I'll make videos about how to create a timeline, history, and exactly how you can apply the themes that you've settled upon to that history. So yeah, stay tuned for that. If this video has been helpful to you, then go ahead and check out the description below, where you can join my world building mastery community. I'm making a full course on world building, which will be posted there soon. I want to build a community of talented world builders and writers, from whom the great artists of our generation will be born. In any case, thanks for watching, and I'll have more content to come soon. Bye!